It looks like we now have a ballot harvesting strategy that will crush the Democrats in 2024. The strategy is coming from Sean Steele, the Republican National Committeeman from California. He's a very savvy political tactician. His wife, Michelle Steele, just won her House race in California's 48th district, and she won largely through utilizing this ballot harvesting strategy, which effectively neutralized her Democrat opponent's early mail-in vote advantage. And she's not alone. Republicans control the House right now precisely because of all of these wins in California, where ballot harvesting is the legal norm. It was, in fact, Kevin Kiley, the winner of California's 3rd district, who put the GOP at 218 seats and in control of the House. So there's some magic going on here in California, while our hopeless pundit class is trying to come up with some narrative that explains that success. The answer, as we're finding from Sean Steele, the reason for this success doesn't boil down to a narrative like, oh, Trump sucks, or abortion. Instead, the answer is strategy. It's employing a tactic that since 2018, the Democrats have tapped into for their electoral success, but now the GOP in Southern California is beating them at their own game. Michelle Steele won her seat in a +5 Democrat district. It's a Northwest Orange County district. Biden carried it by 6 points, but Michelle Steele, utilizing this ballot harvesting tactic, won. So, what are they doing? Well, in California, as I'm sure you know, ballot harvesting is, of course, the legal norm. Ballot harvesting is the practice in which political operatives collect absentee ballots from voters' homes and drop them off at a polling place or election office. You may not know, but in California, you can come into the polls with as many ballots as you want that you could personally carry and drop them off, no questions asked. Now, obviously, we can bitch and moan all we want about that, or we can do what California Republicans are doing, and that's adapting their election strategies to beat the Democrats at their own game. The key here is that Republicans have been making conservative evangelical churches their absentee ballot centers. Drop boxes are being placed in the middle of churches throughout their districts. The parishioners are instructed on how to sign the ballot. Both the ballot and the envelope have to be signed for signature matching and verification. And the church elders, in turn, take the drop boxes directly to the register of voters. So the entire process is streamlined. There are clear instructions on how to fill out the ballot. And because it involves church staff and administration taking the ballots to the polling centers, there's a great deal of confidence among parishioners that their votes are being handled responsibly and are being counted with a clear chain of custody protocol being followed. But drop boxes aren't just being put at the center of churches. We're talking gun shops. We're talking sporting and hunting shops. You know, it's any and all kinds of places where patriots hang out. And it's working. Again, what has to be reiterated here is that this is the second election in a row where California Republicans have cleaned the Democrats' clocks using this tactic. We have to remember that back in 2018, that was the first election, the last midterms before this year's midterms. That was the first election California Democrats used the strategy of ballot harvesting, and they clobbered the Republicans. They picked up a whole host of seats. And again, back then, the Republican establishment was doing exactly what they're doing now. They were whining about Trump. It's all Trump's fault. Trump, it's all mean tweets. These idiots actually think that elections are still won based on who runs. Hello, Festerman. But California Republicans didn't go there. They recognized that they got crushed not because of a person, but because of a plan. They realized it wasn't Trump, it was a tactic that beat them in the end. So they adapted. They began to employ the same strategies that Democrats use with their constituencies, but now with Republican constituencies, so as to maximize their vote. They put drop-off boxes in churches, gun shops, and the like, And lo and behold, look at what happened in 2020. Do you remember we came within just a handful of seats of winning back the House in 2020? Do you remember that? Well, just like last Tuesday, that's because a huge portion of those 2020 seat flips came from California. They flipped 4 seats in California alone back in 2020, and by big margins, too. And they're doing it again in this midterm election. Once again, in the second election in a row. It's California where we're seeing the most seats getting flipped from blue to red. One Republican strategist reported that back in 2020, Republicans used a drop box to collect over 12,000 ballots from one single church alone in Southern California. 12,000. This is the SoCal ballot harvesting strategy, and its potential as a national strategy for the GOP is enormous. And that's because we have to remember that evangelical voters, depending on how you define evangelical, but depending on the definition, evangelicals generally make up anywhere from a quarter to a third of the national vote, which is huge. White evangelicals make up the bulk of that percentage, and the AP VoteCast survey found that 81% of white evangelicals voted for Trump in 2020 and 80% voted for Trump in 2016. So we're talking about a huge voter base that with ballot harvesting can get even larger. Remember, one of the biggest disappointments in these last midterms is the failure of the rural vote to come out the way they came out in 2016, 2020. J.D. Vance had a great piece talking about this in the American Conservative, and he noted that rural voters last week simply didn't come out in anywhere near the numbers that we needed them to in places like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan and Arizona. And the reason is because in the end, there wasn't a get out the vote effort to get them to the polls. And shame on us for that, because this has been the pattern, as Vance explained. This has been the historical pattern of rural voters for decades. Rural voters are not that engaged in politics. And when they tended to vote Democrat before 2016, that worked to our advantage. The neocon Rhino Republican Party used to love it when the rural vote stayed home, since they were predominantly Democrat. But now in the grand old Patriot Party, the new Trumpian Republican Party, they're now our voters. And unless Trump is holding tons of rallies in their counties like he did in 2016 and 2020, there is going to have to be an alternative get out the vote campaign to get them to the polls. Or we put drop boxes in every single rural church. Because guess who is the most religious church-going demographic in the nation? Can you say rural populations? It's no coincidence that the 10 most religious states in the nation correspond almost exactly to what have been designated as the most redneck travel destinations throughout the country. This is how we crush the Democrats in 2024. This is how we absolutely overwhelm their early mail-in vote advantage. We're not merely looking to offset their ballot harvesting advantage. We want to smash it. We want to decimate it. Now, obviously, there's more to it, as Maricopa County showed us, the shame to the world. We've got to find ways of being the ones counting the votes, so there's more at the administrative and precinct levels that we need to do, no question. But in terms of overwhelming the actual ballots, this SoCal strategy has worked 2 elections in a row for us. It's time to make it the model for all states that still use ballot harvesting, because it promises to be a real game changer in the elections to come. As always, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. You will definitely want to check out my latest video on the return of Trump and the GOP triumph over Congress and what it all means going forward. You're not going to want to miss it. So make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.